connection to the power supply, um, when we're talking about, um, and that's in my book is 551.46. It talks about the female connector and the molded attachment plug cap is
Mm-hmm.
provided. What is a plug cap? I don't
A,
I don't
a
understand.
plug cap.
Yeah, it says the attachment plug cap shall be of listed type.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
in
there. I had to go back into 551 here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to the codes rearrange the articles a little bit, and like I say, I'm in 2014, and you're in the 2017. They're very similar. Whenever they make a change to the code, it may not be to that article, but they do change the whole code book, so it is complete. So in this case, the Article 551 didn't change much, so they both relate. But it's whatever code that the local jurisdiction of authority is using at that time and has been approved in that area. So that's what we go by. But in this case, I'm looking at 551.46, and it talks about receptacles and caps. Caps is the male plug. Receptacles is the device that's attached to a box fed from a power source. So you can plug that cap into to energize your equipment.
Why
But
don't they just say male plug?
you have a cord cap on the outside to hook to a local utility supply.
Okay. Okay. All right.
That
So
makes
that's what a
sense.
cap is. So if we read cap, we're thinking male plug.
Yeah, male plug. And then when you do get a code, the cap should be defined in the code book in chapter 3 and also in article 100 definitions.
Okay.
Just remember the code book is like an encyclopedia, but once you break it down into the sections that is of concern to you, it makes complete sense.
Well, one of the biggest challenges with that I see in the industry here is the tiny house builder may not put the power cord uh, in a location that can reach a pedestal once it gets to a RV site or a campsite. And here in the book, it says that the cord exposed usable length measured to the point of the entry on the vehicle exterior shall be a minimum of 25 feet, where the point of entrance is at the side of the vehicle, or shall be a minimum of 30 feet, where the point of entrance is at the rear of the vehicle. So they're saying here, I guess, that you have to have this certain length of cord when um, you have a cord that's going to plug into a pedestal somewhere. You have to have a certain length so that you can reach the RV park pedestal. And it changes a little bit in a pull through site, but in a back end site, I think is what they're talking about here. Um, and I think if you go down to location, it says the point of entrance of the power supply assembly shall be located within 15 feet of the rear on the left roadside or at the rear of the left longitude center of the vehicle within 18 inches of the outside wall. The way I interpret that is if you're on the left side roadside, which is driver's side in America, the
Mm-hmm.
back corner, you hook your tape on that back corner and you pull forward toward the vehicle, toward
Mm-hmm.
the hitch, 15 feet, and you can have the point of entrance of that power supply anywhere in that 15-foot area. Or if you hook your tape on the back, on the driver's side, and pull over 18 inches, then you can have your point of entrance of that power cord right there. I just wanted to get that cleared up a little bit there, but the reason behind it is that it may be used at an RV park, and in that case, you would need to have the right lengths and the right location of your power cord. Same thing with your plumbing. You know, there are certain locations to put your drain and your supply line for your plumbing, and that is all about being able to go to a site and reach with the power cord that you have. So you don't have to use an extension cord, right? To extend.
No, and basically what they're talking about is they're trying to be on the same page as other codes that are required. So when I'm talking about an RV park, that's usually on the driver's side. It's usually near the back of the campsite, or it's at the very rear of the campsite. So this cord needs to be long enough to be able to plug into that source. So with that being said, they're wanting to make sure whatever the layout of your tiny home is, it may require that there is no feasible way that you can put it on the left driver's side. And if you put it somewhere else, that is okay, but it has to meet the minimum standards of the length of the cord. If you get a long cord, it's not only a tripping hazard, but more than that, it has to do with voltage drop and the heating up of the cord. So they want to keep it as short as possible, but feasibly long enough to be able to plug into sites no matter where you go in the United States or Canada, to where you can be able to plug into their utility source and not have to add an extension cord. The more cords you add and the more connections you have is where the weak spots are, and that's where you could have an issue. And it could be storming a lot, so it's going to get wet and it could get damaged. So they're just trying to make a long story short, saying make it this certain length, put your outlet on this side preferably, and if you do that, then you'll be able to go to any site and be able to plug in safely and use your tiny home.
Cool. And then also in this same section, it has, the configuration of a 30 amp, 125 volt, 2-pole, 3-wire with a ground, and a 50 amp, 125/50 volt, 250 volt, 3-pole, 4-ground type of a plug or an outlet. And they have receptacles and they have caps. So they show you. Caps would be the plug. So they
Yes.
show you what a receptacle looks like and what a cap looks like. And then they also talk about labeling. They have a warning label here that says this connection is for 120 volt, 60 HZ, then the blank amps, whether it's 30 or 50 or whatever, power supply. So when they're talking about 60 hertz, I guess is what the HZ stands for.
Yeah, 60 hertz. The United States, when they spin their generators, they generate electricity on a 60 hertz cycle. When you get into Europe, it's 50 hertz, and then some other countries could do some other things. But primarily, the United States operates on a 60 hertz cycle. That has to do with heat in the conductor and the ampacity and the voltage level. So you don't have to know all that theory, but what you need to understand is to make sure it meets the configuration of the cap and of the receptacle. The nice thing about NEMA and the nice thing about the National Electrical Code, they recognize that when several different vehicles, whether it be a recreational vehicle, trailer, or a tiny home, when they go to these sites, you may have a 50 amp receptacle and you'll have a 50 amp receptacle to plug it into. But you get to some of the smaller units and they only have a 30 amp 120 volt. And now you go to a site and it has a 50 amp 250 volt. What do? Well, NEMA's satisfied that requirement by making these little conversion cords. They're only about 12 inches long or 2 foot long, and it'll have the female receptacle for your male cord, like a 30 amp 120 volt. And it'll have a 50 amp on the male cap, so you can plug into that 50 amp source. You're only going to use the 30 amp because why? Is because remember, you got a main breaker or some kind of disconnect on your tiny home, and that's going to be rated for 30 or whatever the tiny home is rated for. And that will protect that conductor because no more electricity can go through that device without it tripping. And you can use the source that's a lot larger than what you need and be able to have that available to you instead of saying, "Oh, I'm gonna have to run a generator."
Okay. So yeah, so you have the
But they have
safety
to
of the
be
breaker.
NEMA approved and UL listed, NEMA configuration with UL listed on the device itself, the
Well, let's
cord.
go back
You can
to
buy
the
them at
30
Home Depot. Yeah.
let's go back to the 30 amp and the 50 amp
Okay.
a little bit. On the 30 amp, I see a G, a W, and then one that doesn't have anything on it. And on the 50 amp, I see a G, a W, an X, and a Y.
What they're talking about there is polarity. And polarity is about putting the right conductor on the right terminal so it's considered polarized. They want W to be the grounded conductor that does carry current. That's usually white in color. That's what the code requires in chapter 1. And then the G is the grounded conductor, which they call equipment grounding conductor. That's what we were talking about earlier, is a conductor size large enough and colored properly so it can connect to the metal framing of the tiny home. So your green wire would go on the G. Your white wire would go on the W, and you see how convenient that is because they got G and W.
Right.
And then your ungrounded conductor or your hot wire or the dark colored conductor, black normally or red, would be on the one that's not marked.
So in the 30 amp, you only have one not marked, which means you have a W white wire, which is sometimes called a neutral wire.
Yes.
And then you have your G, which is your green or the ground wire. And then you have one hot lead, which is probably a black on the 30 amp. But
That
with
is
the
correct.
50 amp, you have two hot leads, an X and a Y, and each one of those would carry 120 volts.
And they
And
are the
so,
darker colored ungrounded conductors, what we call hot.
okay, the hot wire. And
They're
so you could
normally,
actually,
normally in NEMA and insulation standards, they make it red and black. So the manufacturer will supply something red and black, and you know that is your ungrounded conductors. Now you're going to ask, well, which one's the black one go on? Which one's the red one go on? It doesn't matter. It's just two sources of electricity for the home. I was talking earlier about a 120 volt conductor and a 120 volt conductor across both of them. The phases would be different and it would be 240 volts. So you have more power to your tiny home that you normally wouldn't with 120. So on the Y and the X, it doesn't matter which one they would be, just long as the black is on one of them, the red is on the other. And on the G would be the green conductor, and the W would be the white. Now it's polarized, everything is safe, and you can energize that piece of equipment.
okay. And so to clarify, the 50 amp, you could actually get 240 volts
That is
because you
correct.
have two 120,
Yes.
um, 120 volt conductors or hot leads that are on a different phase.
Yes.
Is that how you would say that? That
Yes.
they're
And
on a different
yeah,
phase?
and phases, instead of getting getting into theory about it, when a generator spins, they have different windings on the generator, and as it spins, it's creating a magnetic field on each one of these coils. You can designate each coil a different phase. It's another source of a magnetic field. So the bigger your tiny house, the larger the service you need. So you probably would want to use a 50 amp to 50 volt. But the smaller one that it is, and it doesn't have that much electrical equipment in it, within a 120 volt 30 amp would be sufficient. So they're providing for the larger tiny homes two different phases, the 240 volt, so you can have two 120 volt services to your tiny home.
Okay. Yeah, because that's sometimes difficult to understand. You
Yeah.
have two 120 volt
Yeah, and
services.
that's the way you should look at it because that's actually what it is. Two separate sources on one receptacle so you can use more appliances and equipment in your tiny house without fearing overloading something and tripping it.
Hmm. Okay.